Hello, friends. Welcome to Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is the 2026 mergers and acquisition rebound, why logistics is primed for a banner year with Logisyn's Ron Lentz. How's it going, Ron?
It is a great day. I'm not in the cold, so I'm down here in Florida, so that makes it even better.
Oh, very nice. So, Ron, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
As I said, I'm down here in Sarasota, Florida. My company's name is Logisyn. Logisyn is a name that we developed. It's just logistics and synergy put together. What we do is we are an investment bank and that we do advisory services for both what we call the buy side and the sell side for mostly entrepreneurial type clients.
And you serve transportation companies, whether it's carriers or non-asset based?
We are in the business of only transportation and logistics companies. When you find most investment bankers that are doing M&A, they are industry agnostic, so they're doing across the board type deals. We focus 100% of our efforts every day in transportation and logistics. We like to say that we've walked in your shoes because I was an operator and my partners were operators too.
And you'll do tech also, right?
We do logistics tech. So
Right,
if it's
right.
if it's in supply chain or has to do with something with whether it's AI, warehousing, transportation brokerage, freight brokerage, those type of things, we're very involved in that too.
Very nice. So who are your customers? What problem are you solving for them?
So our customers, and we focus almost 100% of our efforts on what I would call the entrepreneurial customers. Those are customers that, not necessarily baby boomers, but a lot of baby boomers that had built
I like
a business.
those guys.
I love those guys. See, I have that gray hair too, Joe, so that's okay. It's a niche that we like to fulfill because they have spent, some of them 10 years, some of them 40 years, some of them 50 years in the business, building a business, sometimes a legacy business. Sometimes it's been passed on from one or two generations into their hands. And now, if they are waking up in the morning and want to sell, we probably don't want them as a customer. We want them as a long-term client because what happens is they're not prepared to go to market. So we like entrepreneurs that we can talk to, that we've built relationships over the years with. I've been doing this now, Joe, I'm almost embarrassed to say 50 years. And next year actually does make 50 years.
I told you, you say, when you get to a certain point, you say for over 25 years. And everyone goes, that guy might be 50 years old.
Our marketing department puts on our website, I think that I've done it for one time it was over 25, then it was over 35, then it was over 45. And I said, okay, we're stopping there. We're not talking about it anymore. But our client is those clients that have reached that stage in life, generally on the sell side, that they want to take a next chapter. They either want somebody to come in there and invest into their company and make it bigger, or they want somebody to buy their company from them. On the buy side, what we do is we work with clients that most transportation logistics companies today, Joe, struggle in growth. They just do. It's been a tough time over the last few years. So one of the ways that they can grow instead of organically is through acquisitions. So we help them figure out what their strategy is, what their core competencies are, what their culture is, because cultural compatibility is key. And then we help them down that path to find the right companies to buy.
Yeah. And I think about this all the time when it comes to, because I do talk to a lot of companies. When you've built a business, maybe over 25 years, and maybe you have some family members in it, maybe you just have some close partners, you have a team, and you think, we've done well. We've sold things, we've fulfilled things, we've made some money. But one thing you don't know anything about for the most part, this is true 99% of the time, you've never successfully exited a company. So you might know a lot of things, but what you don't know is what Ron and his team knows. And this is the biggest deal of your life. You don't want to be an amateur.
Boy, I think I'm going to take that portion that you just said there, Joe, and I'm going to put it on my website because it's so true. It is 100% true. They've never done that. They don't know the data that's going to be required. They don't know how the deep dive is going to go into their company and literally explore every portion of their business, from finance to HR to operations to sales to safety, if they have independent contractors or employees and how they set them up, if they have unions or non-unions, if they're assets or non-assets, how do they run capitalization costs and those things. And we do all that for them. We help them set all of that up. In addition to that, one of the things that we've been very proud of doing is we have partners. We get nothing out of it. We enjoy the fact that we have a pretty good stable of high quality individuals. Some of them are lawyers that are specialists in M&A. Some of them are tax advisors, because last thing you want to do is wake up and sell your company and not know what to do with the money when you get it, because Uncle Sam will get a lion's share of that. And then we have outside accountants and CPAs that can help them. So we try and make sure that they're equipped not only with the best investment banker, which is us, but also with the best partners that can help them prepare and be ready to sell their business.
Yep. And on the other side of the equation, you also represent buyers who are looking for kind of, hey, we're trying to grow by buying up. I'm sure they'd rather just go without you. Maybe they've made some other acquisitions, but you know the market. So they call you because Ron will know someone.
You know what's interesting, Joe, is that today I'm CEO of our company, and I probably start off every single day with no less than 15 people that AI has put me on a list somehow. And I might get somebody that wants to give me lead generation. I might get somebody that wants to buy my company. I might get somebody, they know nothing about me. They really don't. And that's the problem and the competitive nature of somebody who's on the buy side today. They're going up against private equity or financial sponsors that have a kid who's come straight out of college. He's been given a list that AI has generated and says, okay, call this list and see if anybody wants to sell their company. We might be interested in buying it. So it's good for us, because what we do is we're very targeted approach. We dive deep with our client to understand who they are, what their strengths are, and what would a good acquisition mean to them. Would it be an acquisition so that it was strategic in some of their HR needs? Maybe they need a stronger sales force. Maybe they need better technology. So could they pick that up through an acquisition? Maybe they need to handle a better geography. They might be in the Northeast of the United States, and they want to be in the Southwest of the United States. How are they going to find the right company that matches them? So we play matchmaker with that to understand who they are, what their needs are, and also what the financial parameters are. So it works a lot better that way.
Yep, absolutely. Ron, we'll talk more about this in a minute. Tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you started Logisyn, and why did you start Logisyn?
Great question. I'll try and keep this under 5 hours here, Joe. So I actually grew up in the city of Chicago. So I'm a Chicago boy.
You're a freight guy.
Yeah. I came from a very blue collar steel mill family. Went to college on a partial football, basketball scholarship, which was great. A small Division III school called Augustana College, which was a great school because I got tied up into a thing called Title IX, lost all my other scholarship offers to Title IX. And after I got out of school, I went to work for Arthur Andersen for a brief period of time in audit. I hated audit, to be honest with you. It was not who I was or wanted to do. And my dad said, there's this company that's looking for a controller. Would you be interested? And I said, I'd be interested in anything if I can get out of audit, because my routine was pretty standard. Sunday night or Monday morning, I'd leave, fly someplace, go in a back room, open up these banker boxes, and go through journal vouchers from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock at night. And then we'd go out and have a few pops during the nighttime. And that was 42 weeks a year was on it. So I didn't want to really do that anymore. And that wasn't my personality. So went and did this interview with this truck rental and leasing company called Ryder.
Oh, not too shabby.
They at the time were about a $600 million company and looking to grow. I was a controller. I was hired as a controller trainee, which I was in there for 2 months, and then I was the controller. They were moving so fast and growing so much that anybody that they identified as having a little bit of talent and starting to understand the business, they would put you in it. So they put me in there. Then I went to operations a year later. Then I went into sales a year after that. So I was in sales from 1980 to the almost the end of my career. But I ended up running full service lease sales for them up until 1988. And in 1988, I helped put together a deal that changed our company. At that time, logistics was a defense term. It really wasn't in the public sector at all. And we had an opportunity to help Skip LaFleur build out the Saturn operations without true just in case. Because if you remember back in the 80s, everything was just in case. It wasn't just in time. It's supposed to have been just in time, but it was just in case.
Which means you have a ton of inventory.
Yes, exactly. So we helped them with that. And after 9 months of that being done and implementation integration, I didn't have a job. And my CEO of Ryder said, "We liked what you did there. Can you expand that?" And long story short, over the next 11 years, I helped build the 3PL business at Ryder. Took it from an $80 million business to a $5.8 billion division. And I actually got recruited out of that in 1999 to build my first company, which was a BPO company on the backbones of all the technology that didn't work in the 90s. We got bought by private equity 2.5 years later, paid a pretty good price for us. They didn't want me or my partner, which is okay. And I became a fix-it guy going into 4 different companies that were in trouble. One of them, the biggest one being a company called, at the time, it was Geo Logistics, and I then changed its name to Agility Logistics. And we fixed the company. I successfully took it from $1.8 billion company to $1.4 billion company. Notice I said successfully took it from 1.8 to 1.4. They had some business that they really didn't need. They had made a lot of acquisitions that weren't synergized into their business. We ended up selling that company to a company out of Kuwait called PwC. It's not PricewaterhouseCooper. We called it People with Cash because they overpaid for it. Again, they didn't want me. I was the fix-it guy. Stopped doing that. I did that 3 more times. And then in 2010, at the end of the last one that I did for a Hong Kong-based company, successfully fixed it and sold it. Said I really did not want to be a restructuring guy anymore, and met a partner. At that time, my partner, we created an investment bank out of Boston. And for 10 years, we built it into one of the largest industry agnostic banks. I handled transportation and logistics. And after 10 years, we were doing both M&A and we were doing restructuring. I decided I did not want to do the restructuring anymore. So at the end of 2019, I said to my partner, I didn't want to do that anymore. And he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I just want to do M&A on transportation logistics." He said, "Okay, go ahead." I left him. A few hours later, I called up a friend of mine who I was working with on some smaller deals, a gentleman by the name of Chris Ahrens, who had created the #1 freight forwarding technology in the industry, and said, "Would you be interested?" And he said, "Yes." And literally had dinner with him that night. And on a napkin, we created Logisyn. We took on a third partner, a gentleman by the name of Jan Raymond. Jan was number 2 in command at Fritz Companies. And he made plus 80 acquisitions with Fritz. And then he was responsible for selling it to UPS Supply Chain Solutions. After he was done with that, UPS Supply Chain Solutions offered him a job, which he took for a couple of years to set up UPS Supply Chain Solutions. He really didn't like working in a large corporation, went off and created his own law firm, which he was very successful with. And he was our second call. We called him up. He became our third partner. And 2 months later, we were in the middle of COVID, which was the craziest time to do something in 2020. But we got lucky enough to bootstrap the company and take on a bunch of deals that first year. Most of the companies were in trouble, needed to be sold. And we saved all those companies, sold all those companies, and started adding to our personnel, both on what I would call the engagement team, who handle the day-to-day operations and the day-to-day flow of activity and questions and all the things that have to be done to put a deal together. And then we started adding more what we call rainmakers or executive sponsors. And today we have 24 people, moving to 25 people pretty soon. And we average, I was saying that we average about a deal a month, but we've had 4 deals by the end of this month. We'll have 4 deals done this year. So I guess we're doing 2 deals a month now.
Nice. Nice. You've got the perfect background for it. And earlier on, you said you were doing, and a lot of mergers and acquisition companies, no shade here, are agnostic, but we're a unique business. And if I go in for heart surgery, I'm not looking for a general practitioner, a heart doctor, right? And
Yes.
this is, again, the biggest deal that you're ever going to make. If you're selling your business, there's a legacy at stake here, and you may be a retirement at stake here. And you don't want to take a chance. You don't want to say, this guy's learning. He knows a little bit about trucking because he used to do the books one time. Nope, that's not good enough. One other thing I want to talk about before we get into, I want to talk about the trends going on in our space. But if I was selling a company today, let's just say I own a nice warehousing company, I've made some money, but I haven't really thought about selling until now. There's some fix it up work that needs to be done. Maybe I've got my brother-in-law who's mostly retired, but he's still on the payroll. Maybe I've got an extra space that I'm not using, but I still rent. That all drags down what I'm going to get later on. So I'm assuming you guys come in a lot and say, we got to clean up. It's like staging a house. Like you say, hey, this room needs to be painted before we even consider selling it, because no one's going to look past this. They should look past it, but they aren't going to. So please elaborate on that fix it up. I think you called it earlier.
That is the perfect analogy of selling a house, is exactly what you have to do. I call it the 6 Ps. My marketing director will be mad at me because I'm going to tell you what 6 Ps are. She calls it 5 Ps because she doesn't like one of the Ps that I say in there. But it's proper planning prevents piss poor performance. And you have to go in. And it's funny you mentioned warehousing, because yesterday I was on a final call with a potential new client. And one of the questions that was asked of me is, have you ever walked through a warehouse before? And have you ever done any warehousing work before? And I said, to be honest with you, I haven't put a total number to it, but it's somewhere between 30 and 40 million square feet of warehousing space that I have actually run. And they went, no. And I said, I can show you some pictures of some of them. Just tell me what you want to see, anywhere from probably a 15,000 square foot cross stack to a million square foot ABC distribution center. And I started talking the lingo, as you were saying there. And that's what we can do. We go in there, to your point, we go in there on site, we walk through it, say, now walk me through this. Joe, if you were the business owner of that warehouse, I would say, walk me through this. Tell me what you do. How do you do it? Exactly what you want to do. Because our businesses, for the most part, are show and tell. And you've got to be able to walk and talk and tell that story. It's a sales approach. You also have to have different people inside of that organization that can tell that story. Because let's just say that the CEO does all the talking, but he's the guy who's going to go sit on a beach. Buyers don't want that. They don't want him to be the guy who's talking, because if he's the guy who's talking, they're going to say, what the hell am I buying here? Because this guy's going to go sit on a beach, and I bought a company that doesn't include him. So you have to understand all the dynamics of that going into their family. It's not uncommon. Here's a crazy one for you. I was selling this business a few years ago that the guy loved racing sports cars. He was in the next generation down from NASCAR. And he had about $6 million worth of equipment, space, pole barns, 2 $1 million RVs that and his race cars that he had all on his books. And I was like, no, this is all going to cut him off. Nobody's going to buy you and pay you for your toys. It's just not going to happen. And we had to clean that up.
Yeah, and by the way, when you sell a house, you said, hey, I didn't clean it up, I didn't stage it, so I got 10,000 less dollars than I wanted. But with a business, there's a multiple. So it's I have an extra terminal that I wanted to grow into it, but we never did. Now it just cost me 100 grand a year. Now there's a multiple that Ron's going to say that's how much it's costing. It's not costing you 100 grand a year. It's costing you a
Seven or eight
million,
hundred. Yeah.
700 or 800
Yeah.
in the sale of that business. So you got to get that off your books.
Exactly.
And they don't,
Exactly.
and they're not necessarily, the buyers aren't looking to fix your company. They want it to be, I'm sure some will, but I'm assuming the guys you're representing say, we want it clean when we get there.
The majority of the buyers want a clean business. They want a good, healthy business. They don't want to spend the time and the money and the effort because they don't know how deep the hole is.
This is why you got to make the relationship with a company like yours well in advance and start getting before you want to sell it. And I've heard people say this to me before. The reason you're talking about M&A is divorce, death, or disease. Ideally, that's not it, but you should have a relationship just in case, God forbid, one of those, we're all going to get it someday. Hopefully not
Yeah,
divorce.
and the biggest thing that I try and tell people, and we never have enough business, but we have a lot of business. So I don't have to sell every single client that we go on. But one of the things that I tell people is don't use your country club banker. By that, I mean, they're a golfer. They go to their country club. They go, hey, Joe, I think I'm going to sell my business and I don't know exactly what to do. And there's a guy over in the next aisle and he's a business broker. And he goes, hey, I sell businesses. Let me help you. And he knows nothing about transportation and logistics. He knows nothing about recurring revenue. He knows nothing about how they're going to actually play with the numbers from one month to another. If it's a project-based business, or how they handle the roller coaster, because all of a sudden they'll have a fantastic month and then they'll go a couple of months with nothing going on. So there's a lot of that happens.
Yep. So I want to talk about, I know you represent the sell side and you represent the buy side. And then I want to talk about the business segments in between, but I'll set the table here and I want your 2 cents on it. During COVID, we had this incredible business. Everything boomed, and we had a lot of people made a lot of money. And then we had this horrible bust cycle. It feels like it's been forever, but this has been a freight recession that has definitely hit the carriers, definitely hit the brokers. Warehousing had its own issue with this because there's a lot of e-commerce sales that grew during COVID that tailed off since then. But none of these businesses are going away, but they've had some challenges. So talk about that COVID era, but also the time after, which feels like a decade, but it's only been a couple of years. And what do you see going on in the near future?
Yeah, the 20s are great. The 2020s. This decade is the craziest decade that I've ever worked. It started off with COVID. And like you said, it was a boom. If you could take advantage of it and you didn't take advantage of it, you were probably not too smart to take advantage of it in 20 and 21. And then all of a sudden, 22, a big dose of reality came into it. And we've been in that for 4 years. So it's been going on with the freight recession. I think you're seeing the bigger companies getting bigger. When you look at the big trucking companies, wow, they've cash on their balance sheet and they've decided, okay, it's time to gobble up anybody who might be in trouble, anybody who has spent money on assets. And look at what happened. I did a huge deal in the 90s with John Deere, and did a lot of work with their marketing department. And they were telling me that when the yield is high, farmers have money to burn in their pockets and they really truly want to buy new tractors, new equipment. And John Deere positioned everything along the yield basis based off of that. Well, Class 8 tractor manufacturers should have done the same damn thing, because if you look what happened, there was such a need in 20 and 21 for equipment. People were going out, and a trailer that was costing $35,000 is now costing $50,000 or $55,000. Tractors increased by 50%. And a lot of people were buying that based on the current need, not on the future need. And they over committed on their capital requirements. And lots of that is fixing itself right now. It's been, for the last year, has been fixing itself. I see that changing, and based off of the way you titled this whole segment with me, I really see that everything is changing now. And it has to do with cash. There's just so much cash in the marketplace today, and on two fronts. Number one, look at the stock market. Look at your individual portfolio, what it's done over the last couple of years. Look at companies' cash on their balance sheet that they have today. They have to spend that money. They don't spend that money, they're going to pay tax on it. So why not spend it? Why not make acquisitions? You look at different bigger companies. You look at Maersk a couple of years ago, they went out and became vertically integrated with buying up everything. You look at Geodis going from a French company to coming into the United States and buying one of the largest warehousing and final mile companies that was in existence. So that's the trend, and that's the trend that's really going on now. The last couple of months, in fact, in the last 2 days, you've seen where the other side of the coin, where private equity has so much cash. Joe, there is over today, I just did this last week. Today, there is over 4 trillion, that's with a T, $4 trillion of dry powder sitting on the books of private equity firms globally today that they have to spend. And the worst part about that is the majority of that money is older money. So it's 3, 4, 5 years old, meaning you use it or you lose it type stuff. So they have to do that.
Yeah, and if you look at this industry, I always say this is a catch-all industry. The biggest carrier is what, 2% of the market? Compare that, say, to automotive, where you say maybe there's 10 automakers. They all have 10, 15, 20%. There's no such thing as a 1% company. There is. They're high end. Maybe there always will be these niches that are 1%. 2% is the biggest carriers. They buy better. They're more efficient. They're going to continue to grow. I don't know, they're going to be 4 or 5 and eventually 10% of the market. Same thing when you look at the freight brokers. I've talked about this one lately. The biggest number of freight brokers, I think it was 31,000 during COVID. Now we're down to 25,000. I asked Kevin Hill over at Brush Pass Research, tell me about tell me what's going on in that market. And I wrote it down here. The top 1,000 brokers have 80% of the market. The top 100 have 2/3, 66% of the market. The top 20 have half the market. That's only going to continue. The 25,000 to an outside observer in this business goes, wait, what do you mean there's 25,000 brokers? I don't know what the right number is, but it's probably not going to be 25,000 in a decade. And I think the companies that they can make the investments, they can grow to a size where they have the efficiencies and the volume are going to win.
I agree. I agree 100%.
We just saw Echo by ITS, obviously a big dog buying another big dog.
So it's funny you say that. I was involved with ITS on the first time that they sold, so I know those guys extremely well. And if you ever want to talk structure of deals, I'd love to talk structure, because those guys made more on the third time that they sold the company than the first time they sold the company.
That's why you get someone like Ron Lentz involved, because again, I don't know who owned ITS at this point, but you don't have that exit every year. It's a once in a lifetime. Maybe it's a once in a family lifetime. Your generations of money being made, and everything's got to go. So I want to talk about the individual trends for the business segment. So I just mentioned the broker. So why don't we talk about them first? What's going on in the freight brokerage market in terms of the sell side and the buy side?
There's a tremendous amount of want on the buy side of people who are either transportation brokers or want to be transportation brokers that want to buy other transportation brokers. It's a crazy marketplace today in that few deals are getting done because the numbers just aren't there to support it. You go in to buy somebody and they say they got $3 million worth of EBITDA, and you get into it, and they did have $3 million worth of EBITDA 2 years ago, and now they have $500,000 worth of EBITDA, but they want to sell it off of $3 million worth of EBITDA. So it's that's the toughest marketplace, to be honest with you, that we have right now, is anything to do with traditional transportation brokerage. As you said, the big are getting bigger and the small are going away. There's been a lot of them that have gone out of business, and I think there's going to be more consolidation in that market space. I also think that AI is going to do a number in that market space. I really firmly believe. I was early into Flexport when they were doing the whole freight forwarding and what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. The technology wasn't there yet for Flexport to be able to do what they wanted to do. It's there today, and it's there globally, and it's there domestically for transportation brokerage. So I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of consolidation continuing on the freight brokerage side.
Yep. And if I could add something in here, and I'd love your 2 cents on this. I wrote an article years ago, and some of it's right, a lot of it's wrong. But one thing I was saying in the article that I wrote was that back in the day, if you watched Saturday football or Sunday football, pro or college, you would see 6 or 7 ads for Merrill Lynch, Payne Weber, E.F. Hutton. The stockbrokers were everything. And if you wanted to buy a stock at that time, you couldn't buy it any other way. I guess there was discount brokerage since 78. But most people just bought mutual funds. And by the way, when you bought through a stockbroker, they charge you $200 or $300 for you to buy it. And then when you wanted to sell it a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, they get another $200 or $300. And you're like, and there was no other game in town. It just was that. It was that. And so they had it all. And they always had these glass offices, beautiful. You go in and there's always hired former athletes, and they'd be patting you on the back and talk about hunting or fishing or football, whatever you're into. And they would say, I remember guys from my country club would say this, they buy from me because of the relationship we've had over all these years, which is very similar to what our freight brokerages say. What happened to the stockbrokers is discount came in, and then the internet came in right behind it. And all of a sudden, the fees became completely transparent. And also, you're completely aligned with now. If you don't have a stockbroker, you have a financial planner who gets 1% of your portfolio every year. But they used to churn accounts. Some old person would have $1 million, and they would just churn it until it got down to $500,000, and then they get caught. I think the same thing's happening to the freight brokers. The transactions, it's going to be hard to charge a lot of money for the transactions. I think there's going to have to be other business services you provide, and everyone's going to have a commoditized fee that everyone's going to know what it is. I don't know if it's $35 or whatever it is, but the cost is going way down. Stuff, the Convoy platform that Flexport sold to DAT. When I talked to Bill Driegert, he said it used to cost $150 to get a truck if you're at a freight broker. He said, but if you use the Convoy platform over at DAT, it's $15 or $20. Now, if that's even close to, I don't think he's lying to me, that means the very best are getting down to a very small number.
Very small. I agree.
And I was talking, who was I talking to? One of the Leto brothers who's part of Global Trans. And he said, we used to have this bell in the office where people would go and ring the bell when they made $1,000. And then, of course, that would lead to victory dances. And they were acting like they're in the end zone on a Sunday afternoon. And I said, what happened if you're walking a customer through the office? And he goes, exactly. And they're like, is that victory dance? Because I just paid $1,000 to get a truck. That is not going to be the way of this business. It is going to get a lot leaner and maybe a little meaner.
Yep. I agree. I think that's what's happening to transportation brokerage. I'm sending 3 people this year to TIA, and I think that's a big topic for them. Where is it going, and how long is it going to take them to get there? I think it's exponential, because I think a year ago we started on an AI platforms, multiple platforms, and today where we're at is crazy. I don't even want to dream about where we're going to be at a year from now.
Yeah, and the big boys are really investing in AI. I know C.H. Robinson had a press release that says we respond to 100% of our RFPs, where we used to respond to 60 or 65%. And they're doing with AI. And you can't make those big investments, and I'm assuming some are going to be big investments. You're going to be in trouble. Anyway, enough about the brokers. And I don't mean to paint a negative picture, because I think a lot of people are going to make a lot of money. It's just, and I think also, I can say this, I started my career in automotive. The job I started with, I was a CAD designer. There was tons of us. Not anymore. The technology got better and better. And the job I used to have, I can't find it. It's still, the work is somehow still getting done, but the money we made was spectacular. Not the same. So next thing I want to talk about is the carriers themselves. boy, it's been a rough couple of years for some carriers, but they came through. What should they expect in the buy sell side of this business?
So I'm bullish. Okay. I'm very bullish on assets. I think that you've seen a period of time where, you know, everything kept pushing it down to the carriers. Carriers cut your rates. They can't cut them anymore. Okay. We're creating a bigger driver shortage by limiting CDLs. I just saw something in Illinois today about the number of CDLs that they've given out that are going to be recalled. So you're going to have a lot less drivers available. As you create that, you're going to create bigger demand. And I believe that you're going to start to see, I think you're starting to see a little of it now. I think you're going to see a lot of it by the end of this year, where you're going to see people with assets. They're going to be able to raise their rates and they're going to be able to dictate more of what's going on. I also think that they're going to be a very attractive acquisition targets. We've only had that a couple of times since I've been doing this. I've been only doing investment banking for 16 years. But in 2017 to going into 2018, that happened. You saw people, even private equity, which stays away from asset-based businesses, started going into asset-based businesses. So I think you're going to see that by the end of this year. I think you're going to start seeing a cash flow going into asset-based businesses. I think it's a big deal. And again, it goes back to supply and demand. And there is so much cash out there. Who is ultimately going to control the freight? It's the people who have the trucks.
Yeah, and I think if I could get your 2 cents on this, I'm assuming these buyers are also looking to complete a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle they have. So they might be really strong in cold chain in the West and in the Southwest and in the Northeast, but they're looking for somebody in the Southeast or in the Midwest, and they want you to look a certain way and be a plug and play. Am I right to say that?
Correct. We do a lot with niche businesses. We're not dealing necessarily with the big boys, okay? Most of our companies are, I would say, sub $50 million of EBITDA. So they if you're in that business and you're good in that business, you have a focus and you have a niche. And those people are very attractive.
Yep. And I think I've heard this in the past is if you've set up your business and you say yes to everything and you don't have the right revenue, you're not making the right profit margins, and you're scattershot where you say, oh, we got a little bit of stuff in Chicago, a little stuff in LA. You don't exactly fit into their version of the world. And you want to be. You want to be say, I'm a pure play. I'm not a fixer-upper. When you get here, we have the team, we have the customers, everything's in place. You don't have to fix us. You don't have to make a huge investment in us.
Yeah, I agree. That's what people want.
So the one I'm wondering about now, Ron, is warehousing. And let me preface this real quick. Back in the olden days, pre-e-commerce, if somebody said, I want to distribute to the United States, I need a warehouse, you would say, oh, somewhere in Indiana, maybe Chicagoland, you want to get somewhere in that region and you can deliver in one day to 65% of the US population. And that was good enough. And the 2 or 3 days to wherever else. That all changed with the same day, next day over the last 10 years or so. And now the expectation is for a lot of people, we need same day, next day, which means I'm going to need more locations. And having said that, I think 50% of warehousing companies own one location. Talk about those issues.
That's the issue, is that they own one location. The smart ones have diversified into the needs of their client. We always said that, I go back, Joe, to putting together logistics studies, and there was the 5 locations. If you were to cover the United States, you needed to be along the Jersey Turnpike, you needed to be Atlanta, Chicago. You could do probably Sparks, Nevada, if you didn't want to go into California, and you might want to have been in Dallas or Denver. But if you had those 5 locations, you could pretty much cover 90% of the United States pretty effectively. Today, as you said, it's more inventory, faster inventory. But the good thing is that you can communicate to that inventory. You now know what's on every shelf in every bin with every SKU instantaneously. It's not batch. It's not done on an hourly basis. It's done real time. So you know where your inventory is at all times. You understand those things. Most WMS systems, there's still some When people say they have proprietary WMS systems, I cringe to say, oh, does it have green screens and blue screens to it too? And you go out to the warehouse, and sometimes they do, which is crazy because they've been around now for 30 years. So they should have some better technology than that. But with that being said, most WMS systems integrate into a platform. It's some type of an ERP platform that can identify that. And the smarter big 3PLs have their own ERP platforms that integrate all these disparate units into it. They're not trying to build it themselves. So, they can go off and buy, and that's what's going to happen. If you've got a one-off location in Seattle and it's sitting there and it's a good, well-run location, somebody will go in there and buy that. They're probably not going to get a premium for it, but they'll be able to sell it, and they'll be able to sell it for a decent amount of money as long as they have a good customer base and it's not a concentration customer base. A lot of these guys who have the single warehouse was built off the backbone of one customer. And if they have a 50 or 70 or 80% concentration with one customer, nobody's going to buy that, because what happens if you buy that business and that relationship is with the owner who just went to sit on a beach, and now, you don't have that customer anymore. Now you have a big empty barn.
Yes, yes. And another trend that I've seen, I've talked to a lot of warehousing companies over time. Some of them become part of a larger network, and it almost feels like a consolidation via technology platform. So I could be in Ohio and I say, yeah, my warehouse is 65% full right now, but I can join one of these big tech flex or one of the others or stored, and they'll fill up my warehouse, but they become my sales team and my technology partner for that segment of the business. What does that do to a company?
I'm a little negative on that, to be honest with you. I've seen a couple of companies that have tried to do that. eFill goes back to many years ago, and they were not successful.
You mean the warehousing company or the tech consolidator?
The tech consolidator. The tech consolidator. Yeah. It almost goes into, if you remember when SAP came to the United States, SAP owned Germany. Okay. And they owned all the high end manufacturing in Germany. They came to the United States in the, I would say, the mid to late 80s. And they thought they were just going to take their software and everybody was going to put it in. The problem is that every American runs their own disparate processes. They don't run the same processes. I've been into BMW, I've been into Porsche, I've been into Volvo, I've been into Volkswagen plants. They look alike. Just so you know, I don't know if you're an automotive guy, so I don't know if you've been in there, but they all look
Been to a
alike.
lot of them.
They all look alike. That's not the case in the United States. Everybody thinks that they know how to do things bigger, faster, better than everybody else. So they have their own ways of doing things. And that's why SAP failed. And that's why I don't think that's the easiest thing to do, is have a technology platform that takes multiple different agents, per se, is what you were calling it. And maybe I'm wrong. I've just telling you from my past of what I've seen.
I've kind of looked at those guys. I've interviewed them all. I look at them as almost like freight brokers, where they say, I work with 27 different warehousing companies around the country. If one starts to stumble, we'll try and fix it. But if we can't, we'll replace them with somebody who's just meets our standard. And so I understand where they're coming from. My concern for the warehousing companies, and this is just, I probably should stay on the shallow end of this stuff, but somebody else is filling your warehouse. They're obviously getting paid. They control a portion of your warehouse. They control a portion of your sales. I don't know how comfortable all of them are going to feel that way. So somebody said this to me years ago, and I wouldn't say the name if I remembered it, but guy said, I took over my grandpa's warehouse. And he said, I just got this third party company to fill it up for me. And I said, is it profitable business? He goes, barely. And I was like, that's a problem. You let somebody else do the hard work.
Yeah.
And he said, so what I'm trying to do is wean myself off of the lower margin business that was fairly easy to get.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with where you're thinking on that.
And I would also say, please speak to this, because I think this is a huge issue during COVID, probably cleaned up by now in most places. One of my good friends who owns a warehousing company, during COVID, he said, Joe, we can work with anyone. We can work with I don't care how they're small, as long as they have volume, we'll work with anyone. And I was like, that's just not what I hear. I don't know. You're closer to it. And then a year later, he said, Joe, there's some of our customers that are too small. They don't have the enough movement. So they're just basically storing slow moving SKUs at our location. And I said, you got to charge them for that. And so I think what I've seen is a lot of small e-commerce startups get kicked out of the bigger warehousing companies.
Yeah. And there has been a ton of e-commerce startups. So that's how do you pick the good ones from the bad ones? I'm not smart enough to pick them out.
It's a hard business. Everyone wants to say, yes, I got in here and these guys have tons of fast moving SKUs and nothing slow. It's not the reality of it a lot of times. And gosh, I've been to these warehouses. I remember being at one just before COVID, and I was there all day with the owner, and I remember thinking, this is so nice. And then I even referenced it to him. I said, I remember going to warehouses when I was young, and they were dark and dirty and dingy, and stuff was there from the war. It was the least high tech thing in the world. Now they are really working hard. And so, by the way, there's a ton of warehousing tech that has grown up and is going to continue to change that business. So anyway, what are the issues that you're seeing when somebody says, hey, it's time to sell my warehousing business? One location, is that a problem?
It can be done. I don't think it's a problem, but as I said earlier, you just want to make sure that it's not tied to one salesperson or the owner of the company or something like that, because there's very few geographies that somebody wouldn't want to be in. So it doesn't matter unless it's in the Mojave Desert. Why would anybody want to be in the Mojave Desert type thing? So people want to be all over. There's a lot of hesitancy if you have a one warehouse and you're sitting in the Inland Empire in California. Boy, I tell you, they just lots of people. Our number one thing that our buy side clients tell us is, I want business, but I don't want anybody in California. It's just tough to do business in California. So if you have one single warehouse in California, unless you sell it to somebody else in California, you're probably going to have a tough market map of potential people.
A few years back, I interviewed the guy, I forgot his name now, but he worked for the Greater Phoenix Chamber of Commerce, or whatever their organization's called out there. And they were growing like a weed, and they were profiled on the Wall Street Journal. There was a video on YouTube. Fantastic. They were growing like a weed. They're 300 miles from the Inland Empire. Their cost for the buildings was like, I want to say 20, 30% less. Abundant growth in that area, a very positive place to do business, close to the Southwest, Texas, and all those fast growing markets. And people are just saying, I can't find anything in the Inland Empire, but even if I did, it's expensive to do business there. Meanwhile, I can move to a brand new city. It's not a brand new city, but it's growing like a brand new city with a ton of manufacturing, warehousing. It's a logistics hub. I don't think we called Phoenix a logistics hub 20 years ago. Now it is.
We did not. You are correct. Yes.
And it's a really favorite. No offense, Chicago, but Illinois is
Tough state
not
to do business
interested in
in.
business.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, we want your money. We just don't want all your hassle. Phoenix is saying, please come. I had a friend who she bought some assets, and she was Chicagoland. And she said, me and my family are moving to Texas. I go, that's a big shock. She goes, not if you're buying trucks. She said, it's just a lot easier to do business in Texas. So anyway, I've gone way over my time with you. So I want to try and wrap this bad boy up. I'll do the best I can. We've covered a lot of ground. But first and foremost, you guys are mostly buy side, but you also, of course, work with the sellers also. And you work with entrepreneurs who are ready to make the biggest deal of their life, and they don't want to screw it up. This is probably something you've never done before. So you need an expert. You need somebody who's done it dozens and dozens of times. You represent I should say sellers in whether they're a carrier, a broker, warehousing, the technology companies that are growing and consolidating at the same time, because not every tech company is going to stay for the long term. Some are going to get bought up. Some are going to go out of business. You help them clean it up, get that business ready to sell, because every dollar that is misspent, we'll call it, is a factor of 8. So if you say, hey, I just spent an extra $1 million a year on a terminal I never used or trucks that aren't optimized, that's going to cost you $8 million in your sale. So You need somebody who's going to help you clean house, get that fresh coat of paint on the business. And it doesn't happen overnight. I think I heard somebody say to me recently that one of the big challenges now is somebody's looking to buy carriers. They're ready to buy right now, and they might be looking at 3 or 4 deals. They can't wait 2 years while you straighten out your house. So you got to be ready before it's time, and not to be grim, before the death, divorce, or disease,
Yes.
before you start having distress with your partner and saying it's time to get out. You work with the buy side, carriers, brokers, warehousing, tech. You also work with the sell side, the guys who say, we need to make a strategic acquisition. We need help buying this particular company and we can't find them. Ron, please help. Also, I know you guys spend a lot of time on valuation consulting as part of that cleaning house. Anyway, enough of my blather. Put a big old bow on this one, Ron. Final thoughts on the topic.
I'm going to hire you as my spokesperson because you have an extraordinary, I don't normally blow smoke, so I'm not doing this, Joe, but you have an extraordinary grasp on the sell side and the buy side in the M&A activities that require, because you are right. Just don't wake up in the morning and say you're going to sell your business, because you will fail either at selling your business or getting any money for it. And we were recently involved with a business that happened to somebody, and it's really nice. To your point, warehousing business, they were going to sell it for $30 million. We put a package together and said the business was worth $50 million. It was like, I had to do some work.
Grandchildren will thank you.
Yeah, it had to do some work, to your point. But take your time. Whether you hired us or hired somebody else, if you're getting ready to sell, understand that you do not have, if as a business owner, you do not have the resources internally to sell your business, because it is, unless you have a lot of people sitting around twiddling their thumbs and playing on the internet all day, which I don't think you do, you don't have the people that can do all the diligence requirements that it's going to be required for you. So you need somebody to put that together for you, to package it up for you. You need somebody to advise you that you can trust. And I'm still old school. I still believe that trust runs our relationships. I have a pure clause in my contract with everybody that we do. They don't like us, fire us. That's that simple. It's no long term. You don't have to pay me for a year or 2 years or something like that. Don't like us, fire us, because you got to trust us. You got to believe in us. We've got to be able to deliver what it is that you want. And you've said it several times in what is probably going to be one of the most difficult things that you've ever done in your life. The other point that we didn't really talk about is, if you're an entrepreneur owner, I got to hold a lot of hands. It's their baby. They birthed this. They watched it grow up. They watched it go to college. They watched it get married. They watched everything about this thing. And then all of a sudden they're going to give it up. Man, that's a tough thing to do. So that's part of my job responsibility, is holding hands of my business owners and helping them understand I've been there, done that.
Yeah, and you do really you mentioned the trust piece, super important, because Ron's going to come in and his team's going to come in and say some things that you're going to have to believe, and maybe you don't want to believe. And my son-in-law is an investment counselor, and he always says it's 10% investment, 90% counselor. And so you guys are coming in with fresh eyes and say, hey, no offense, your baby's a little ugly. We can fix him up a little bit, but here's the problem with your baby. And we have your best interest at heart. And if you don't believe that, trust the team you're working with. Yeah, cut and run.
Yeah, exactly.
So final thoughts. Give me, why should we work with Ron Lentz and his team over at Logisyn?
Because I've been doing this now in this industry for 16 years. I only hire people that believe in that our number one goal is to help our clients. The money will come. I don't put a lot of hard work into our fees and our fee structure. I got tired of, Joe, when I was running businesses and hiring the big consulting firms, and you deal with the partner, and then they back up after you sign the agreement, they back up the MBA school bus and dump out all the kids, and you were paying $2,000 a day for the kids. We don't do that. Everybody in our organization is experienced and tenured into doing these type of deals and understanding how to communicate with you and communicate in the right way. So we're not the best for everybody, but we're the best for a lot of people. And I highly recommend that people go out there and see and feel and kick the tires of other people, and then have a conversation with us and see if we're compatible with each other, because that's the key ingredient. Cultural compatibility, PricewaterhouseCoopers, that PwC, puts out a study annually, and they've been doing it for a lot of years. And one thing that they put out every single year is that cultural compatibility is the number one reason why mergers and acquisitions either succeed or fail. Cultural compatibility with your banker is the same thing. Your deal will either succeed or fail based upon if you guys are on the same page.
I say this all the time, whether you're an employee or your own business, you got to find your people. And I say this all the time to young people. You can be in a company and you go, God, I just don't know what I'm doing. I don't think I know what I'm doing. And then you get quit or fired and you go to the next place and they love you. They go, and you go, I got to find my people. I had an old boss who used to say it. He was a former vice president from Chrysler and he bought an engineering business and I worked with him at it. And I remember him saying, Joe, I only want to work with right thinking guys, RTGs. and he said, we know how to develop vehicles. I don't want to work with somebody who has different ideas than we do on it. And I was like, oh, I like it. Not always easy because it's sometimes you want to say, this is a big deal. I'm going to force fit this. But if they're not your people, you know it. And they'll know it.
I'll leave you with this. Sam Donald was with, 7 teams?
Yes.
And this year he came to the Seattle Seahawks and found a home. And what happened to him? Now he's got a big ring on his finger.
Exactly. So I don't want to forget this. You guys have a conference you guys do every year. Talk about that conference. When is it and who is it for?
So we do in the middle of September. You can find it on our website. We have this, we actually call it the M&A Club. We have trademarked that. And we want people to go to that, mainly business owners that maybe they're not thinking about selling their business. Maybe they're not thinking about buying other businesses, but they want to explore it and see what the options are. So we put on a 2-day event outside of Chicago, have a little bit of fun, some golf. We bring in top speakers and leaders from around the world. We pride ourselves on that. And we talk about those subjects, not that are near and dear to our heart, but that are near and dear to their heart. And we make sure that's one of the key ingredients for us is that we're servicing the needs of our clients. It started off the first year with 60. Now we limit it to the first 200 people because it's gotten so big and so good, but we love it.
Yeah, and that's right smack dab in the middle of where all the freight is. So not a bad place to be. Also, you can't get better weather than Illinois in September. You can even get the Florida people to come up.
I know. That's me.
Yeah, do it in February, and the answer is no. So I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, a link to your website, any of the links including the link to your conference, and any other links you and your go-to-market team give me. I'll make sure I put those in the show notes so people can reach out and talk to you.
Perfect, Joe. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, just so you know.
Yes, I did too. Thank you so much.
I hope that we can meet on other terms because I enjoy people who are knowledgeable in our industry, and you definitely are.
Yeah, I get to talk to people like you every week, so I try and take notes and remember.
Good for you.
Anyway, Ron, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Okay.
And thank you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.